I was ready to sign the divorce papers, convinced there was nothing left to save. But one night, when I overheard my wife talking to her friends, I discovered a truth I was never meant to hear. What I realized that night changed everything: our pain, our silence, and even my understanding of love. My name is Ethan Walker, 42 years old, married for 14 years to Olivia Bennett. I typed "Divorce Lawyer Chicago" into my phone on a Tuesday at 2 in the morning. The blinking cursor lit up the darkness, barely illuminating the guest room where I had been sleeping for 3 weeks. So that was the end. No shouting, no broken dishes, just me, alone, in a room that still smelled faintly of lavender from an old potpourri. 20 feet away, my wife was sleeping in what was no longer truly our bedroom. If you've ever felt like a ghost in your own life, you know what I mean. That feeling of walking through rooms without leaving a trace, of no longer really existing. That's how I felt after losing my job. I had been a project manager in a downtown tech company with a good salary, benefits, and the pride of believing I was building something solid. Then everything collapsed in 15 minutes. The HR director looked at me with that compassionate smile reserved for the condemned. "It's nothing personal, Ethan. The market's just unstable." That's how 8 years of effort get erased. A handshake, a cardboard box, and a closing door. I stepped out into the gray February cold, the streets of Chicago wet and soulless, feeling like a man who'd just been erased from the world. That evening, I told Olivia. She was chopping vegetables in the kitchen when I simply said, "They fired me." Her knife froze mid-air. She looked up at me, saw the box in my arms, and understood. She set the knife down, wiped her hands on a towel, then came over and held me. "I'm sorry, Ethan." Her jasmine perfume surrounded me, and for a few seconds I believed everything would be okay. But that embrace was the last bit of light before the crack appeared. "We'll get through this," she said softly. "You'll find something better. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise." Those words, "a blessing in disguise," echoed in my head for months, because I found nothing. No new job, no blessing, just emptiness. Every morning after she left for work, I'd make coffee and sit in front of the computer in our small office. I spent hours sending job applications, refreshing my inbox, scrolling through LinkedIn, reading articles about market outlooks. At 42, I was beginning to believe I was already obsolete. In the evenings, I pretended I'd had a productive day, but Olivia could see right through me. "Did you hear back from that startup?" she would ask at dinner. "Not yet," I'd lie. Then came that heavy silence, the kind that evaluates, the kind that judges without meaning to. I wasn't ashamed of losing my job, but of becoming a burden. I had stopped going to the gym, stopped seeing friends, stopped laughing. I just existed. And every day I felt her slipping further away. We didn't argue. It was worse. We were two strangers under the same roof, two polite souls avoiding collision. Tenderness had disappeared without a sound, replaced by a cold distance. One morning, as I watched her get ready for work, I thought, I don't recognize her anymore. Then worse, I don't recognize myself anymore. Olivia had become a ritual, almost mechanical. Shower, light makeup, handbag, a kiss on the cheek. "See you tonight." And me, sitting on the edge of the bed answering, "Yeah, see you tonight." Nothing more. No "I love you," just schedules and routines, like two co-workers sharing an empty space. I should have talked to her, asked if we were okay, if she still cared about me. But I was afraid of the answer. Afraid she'd confirm what I already sensed, that love was gone. So I let the silence grow until it became a third presence between us. a shadow we no longer acknowledged, but that separated us a little more each day. That's when I began noticing details. Insignificant at first. The phone she now took into the bathroom, the messages she read with a faint smile, the evenings she came home late, claiming a meeting at the clinic. Her perfume was different, a mix of cold air and city streets, and me in my corner, unable to tell truth from insecurity. I told myself I was paranoid, that unemployment had made me suspicious, but doubt, once planted, grows fast. One morning, after she left, I entered our bedroom, her bedroom now. Everything was perfectly in place. Nothing seemed suspicious, until I saw her journal lying on the nightstand. Olivia had always kept a journal. She rarely wrote anything intimate, just reflections, memories, fragments of life. I knew opening it would be a betrayal. But that morning my hands trembled, my heart pounded, and I needed to know. I opened it to the last page marked with a red ribbon. I don't know how much longer I can keep living like this. Every day feels like I'm playing a role, the strong wife supporting her husband. But I feel empty. Ethan doesn't talk to me anymore. He lives near me, not with me. I'm trying to stay patient, not to push him, but I'm suffocating in the silence we've built together. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. It wasn't a story of betrayal, it was pain. She was suffering, just like me. After putting the notebook back, I stood still for a few minutes, barely breathing, as if the air itself could expose me. I tried to convince myself that not everything was lost, that maybe there was still a way to talk without breaking everything. But that hope was fragile, a thin layer of glass over a cracked vase. I felt ashamed for snooping, guilty for reading her words, yet deep down, I knew something had to change. Instead of talking, I did what cowards do. I chose paperwork over honesty. I looked up divorce lawyers online and found one downtown. Glass office, sterile corridors, fluorescent lights. I made an appointment like you make one with a dentist when the pain becomes unbearable. Administrative logic felt easier than emotional truth. The lawyer's name was Margaret Hayes, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a voice that didn't waste time. She asked direct questions. How many years of marriage, any children, shared assets? I answered mechanically, listing facts as if testifying in court. When she explained the procedure, the property division, the emotional consequences, I felt my world narrowing around me. On my way home, I walked along Lake Michigan, the icy wind cutting across my face like a confession. Each step felt heavier, as if I were moving closer to a decision I wasn't ready to own. I had imagined the end so many times in theory, practiced my speech, rehearsed my strength. But no rehearsal prepares you for the reality of destroying what you once built with love. I planned to tell her that Friday, calmly, rationally, as if honesty could soften the impact. I'd even rehearsed what to say in my head, how we'd divide things, how we'd move on. But when Friday came, my courage didn't. Olivia came home exhausted, her shoulders weighed down by the week, and I didn't have the heart to ruin her evening. Saturday, I told myself I'd do it tomorrow. Then tomorrow became the next day, and the next. Each time, I found a reason to delay. Her smile, her tiredness, my fear. I felt filthy with guilt, like a man living a lie under his own roof. My silence was becoming its own betrayal. Then, one night around midnight, voices drifted from the living room. I was in the guest room. The wall between us was thin. At first, I thought it was a movie, but the sounds were too soft, too real. Then I heard her voice, my wife's voice, and I froze. Without meaning to, I started listening. What I heard changed everything. Olivia was crying. Her voice was shaky, filled with cracks I'd never heard before. She told her friends she was tired, that she felt alone, that she didn't know how to reach me anymore. The women on the call, I recognized one, Lauren, tried to comfort her, told her to stay strong. And there I was, in the dark, listening to the most painful truth I'd ever heard. "I love him," she said through her tears, "but I don't know how to reach him. He's shut himself away." My stomach turned. All those nights I'd thought she was distant, maybe unfaithful, maybe done with us, they all shattered in an instant. She hadn't abandoned me. She was drowning right next to me, reaching for help I never saw. The next few minutes felt stolen from a world I wasn't meant to witness. Every word tore through me. Her exhaustion, her fear, her loneliness. "I want to believe," she whispered, "but I don't know how much longer I can wait." Those words hit me harder than any fight could. For the first time in months, I saw clearly who the real enemy was, the silence between us. When the call ended, I heard the door to our bedroom close softly. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum. I wanted to run to her, to confess that I'd heard, to beg her forgiveness right there. But shame froze me in place. Shame for spying, for doubting her, for realizing too late how wrong I'd been. I didn't sleep that night. I replayed every word I'd overheard, every cold evening, every missed opportunity to reach out. My mind was a storm of guilt and clarity. Guilt for eavesdropping, clarity for finally understanding. One question wouldn't leave me alone. Now that I know the truth, what will I do with it? The next morning, sunlight filtered through the kitchen window. Olivia was sitting at the table in her pajamas, eyes puffy and red from crying. I felt something push me forward, a force stronger than fear. I stood in the doorway and said her name, unsure if my voice would even come out. "Olivia," I said quietly. She turned toward me, surprised. We hadn't spoken like this in weeks. "Can we talk?" I saw something flicker in her expression, something between fear and hope. And in that fragile space, I knew this was our chance. Maybe our last. I couldn't lie anymore. I told her everything, about the consultation with the lawyer, the papers, my plan to tell her the day before, and my cowardice. The words stumbled out of me, messy and trembling, but honest. Then I said the sentence that had been haunting me for days. I was going to ask for a divorce. She froze. Her face fell apart, not with anger, but with heartbreak. "What?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why?" The pain in her tone was unbearable, the kind that tears through the air and stays there, heavy and alive. I tried to explain. My shame, my sense of failure, the weight of feeling useless. I told her how I'd convinced myself she deserved better, how I thought I was protecting her by staying silent. Olivia stared at me, her tears shining, and said softly, "I told my friends last night that I love you so much it hurts." Those words shattered me. My breath caught, and suddenly the ground beneath me didn't feel real. All this time, I thought she was judging me, when she was just trying not to lose me. The silence that had been our prison now revealed itself for what it was, fear wearing different faces. We sat at the table and talked for the first time in months, really talked. Not about bills or groceries, but about fear, loneliness, and the ache of feeling invisible. Our words were clumsy, but each one felt like a brick removed from the wall between us. For 2 hours, the house was filled, not with silence, but with truth. It wasn't an instant fix. It never is. But that morning, we made a promise to seek help, to stop assuming, to speak before the silence returned. I told her I'd cancel the divorce if we both committed to trying again. She nodded, eyes glistening, and reached across the table. Her hand found mine, and that simple touch felt like the first breath after nearly drowning. That morning, something shifted. The silence that had trapped us for months finally cracked open, letting in a fragile, trembling light. Olivia was still holding my hand, and beneath her fingers I could feel the same fear that lived inside me, the fear of losing everything again. We didn't know if we could fix what was broken, but for the first time, we were willing to try. The days that followed felt like rehabilitation. We walked on eggshells, searching for the right words, the right distance. Sometimes we exchanged only a few sentences, sometimes we talked for hours. It was awkward, often painful, but always honest. And amid all that uncertainty, a quiet hope began to breathe again. I made an appointment with a therapist. I needed help, even though part of me found the idea humiliating. Talking about my weakness to a stranger felt like admitting defeat. But that first session cracked something open in me. I began to see that my worth wasn't tied to my job or my paycheck. It was tied to my capacity to love and to let myself be loved. Olivia wanted us to see a couples counselor too. We met Dr. Sarah Moore, a calm woman with a voice that seemed to soften storms. She told us, "You're both grieving. You're grieving not just your relationship, but the life you thought you had." Her words hit deep. Yes, we were in mourning, but together, mourning could become the beginning of something new. I moved back into our bedroom. That first night, the bed felt huge, almost foreign. We lay there, backs turned, not speaking. But sometime in the middle of the night, Olivia reached out and found my hand. That small gesture was enough to make my heart start beating normally again. Sometimes love doesn't return with fireworks. It returns quietly, through touch. We started living again, slowly. Cooking dinner together, shopping for groceries, watching a movie without one of us leaving halfway through. These simple things became sacred. We were learning to talk differently, to speak before silence could creep back in. "You seem sad today," she would say, and instead of hiding, I'd reply, "Yes, but I want to talk about it." Therapy forced me to face myself. I talked about my pride, about the shame of failure, about how terrified I was of being seen as weak. My therapist said, "Pride is just fear wearing a nice suit." That line stayed with me for weeks. I realized that everything I'd called dignity was really just avoidance. Olivia was learning, too, how to express what she needed without fearing she'd push me away. One evening she told me, "I want us to fight together, not against each other." Those words reshaped everything. For too long, we'd been defending our pain instead of defending our love. 3 weeks after that morning in the kitchen, she stood in the doorway one night, a shy smile on her lips. "I want you to sleep here," she said, "if you still want me." I didn't even hesitate. I never wanted to be anywhere else. That night there was no passion, no rush, just two tired souls finding peace in the same bed again. The following months were a slow rebuilding, filled with small setbacks and quiet victories. I found a temporary job at a nonprofit teaching computer skills to underprivileged kids. The pay was modest, but every day I came home feeling useful again. Olivia said one night, "You seem alive again." And I answered, "Because I finally feel like I matter." We kept going to therapy, learning to listen without interrupting, to recognize when one of us was closing off. The counselor used to say, "Don't let silence become your third partner." That phrase stayed engraved in my mind. Whenever I felt distance creeping in, I spoke, awkwardly sometimes, but honestly. And Olivia did the same. One autumn evening, while we were eating dinner on the balcony, she said softly, "I'm glad you heard me that night." I smiled, a little embarrassed. Me too, even if it was both the worst and best moment of my life. She laughed quietly. Maybe some truths have to be stolen to be understood. The lake wind was cold, but my heart was finally warm again. 4 months later, I received a job offer, a full-time position with the same nonprofit. It wasn't a return to corporate life, and I didn't want it to be. I wasn't managing teams or chasing deadlines anymore. I was helping people find their way, just as I had found mine. Olivia hugged me and said, "I like this version of you better than the man I married." We celebrated our new anniversary 1 year after our kitchen table conversation. We went back to the same small Italian restaurant with red checkered tablecloths and soft candlelight. We laughed, we remembered, and I realized we weren't the same people anymore. We were stronger, not because we never broke, but because we learned how to rebuild. Time kept doing its quiet work. Olivia took on more responsibility at her clinic, and I found real purpose in community work. One night she asked, "What if we tried to grow our family?" I laughed, touched. "You mean a real project, not just job applications?" She smiled, eyes shining. When our daughter, Maya, was born 2 years later, I cried, not out of sadness, but from pure gratitude. Watching her tiny hands, I thought about every night of silence, every missed conversation, every signature I never put on those divorce papers. If I hadn't heard Olivia crying that night, none of this would exist. The thought was overwhelming. Becoming parents brought us back to what really matters. The exhaustion, the laughter, the chaos, the endless small compromises. There were arguments, frustrations, moments of doubt, but never again that deadly silence. We had learned our lesson. Every night, when she lay next to me, Olivia whispered, "Thank you for staying." And I always answered, "Thank you for giving me a reason to." Now, 3 years later, I watch my daughter playing in the living room, covered in paint and joy. Olivia sits beside her, throwing me that look only people who've survived love can share. I don't think about fear anymore, only about the miracle of what we rebuilt. Sometimes life doesn't hand you a second chance. It forces you to create one. I often think back to that night, to the version of me holding a folder of divorce papers, believing that leaving was the noble thing to do. If I had walked out that door, everything I cherish now would have never existed. I didn't save my marriage out of heroism, but because fear hit me at the right time, and I chose love over pride. When people ask how we survived, I tell them the truth. We learned to talk, even when it hurt. Love isn't made of perfect moments, but of thousands of small decisions. To speak instead of run, to listen instead of assume, to stay instead of retreat, and to keep doing it day after day. Tonight, rain taps against the windows, just like it did when everything fell apart. But this time, it feels peaceful. Olivia is cooking while Maya sings in the living room. I close my laptop and join them. She smiles at me, that real smile, the one that says, "We made it." I wrap my arms around her. "Need help making sure you don't burn the chicken?" She laughs. "You just want to taste it first." "Maybe," I admit. We laugh together, and in that sound I recognize the most precious thing in the world, the laughter of a love that survived silence,